The lecture hall buzzed with voices from 100 different species. Clicks, chirps, and melodic tones mixed with standard galactic common as cadets discussed the morning's tactical simulation. In the back row, Wu Park sat alone, her pen moving steadily across the pages of a leather notebook. She did not look up. She did not join the conversations. She simply wrote. "Look at the human," chittered to his group of friends. The mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Still taking notes like a first-year student. Perhaps the concepts are too advanced for her primitive mind. Several cadets turned to look. Wu did not react. Her dark eyes remained fixed on her notebook, her hand never stopping its movement across the page. She had heard worse in her 6 months at the Galactic Defense Academy. Being human meant being different. Being different meant being a target. The Academy orbited Arcturus Prime, a massive station that housed the finest military minds from across the Allied systems. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 20 years ago, and humans were still rare in the upper levels of military training. Most species found them unsettling, too aggressive, too focused on violence, too much like predators. Instructor entered the room, and the chatter died immediately. The stood nearly 8 feet tall, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and holographic projectors. His species had been warriors for, and he commanded instant respect. "Today we analyze yesterday's simulation," announced, his voice deep and resonant. 40 teams entered the asteroid field scenario. All 40 teams failed, some faster than others. He activated the holographic display. The 3-dimensional battlefield appeared above the center of the room, showing the complex maze of spinning asteroids, hidden enemy positions, and narrow flight corridors. It had been a nightmare. Wu had watched her team's fighters get picked off one by one despite her warnings. Team 17, led by Cadet, survived 14 minutes. Impressive aggression but poor resource management. They sat up, proud despite the criticism. Team 9, led by Cadet, survived 11 minutes. Excellent defensive positioning, but too reactive. The Delphians' blue skin rippled with disappointment. Team 23, led by Cadet Park, survived 18 minutes. Paused, his 4 eyes focusing on Wu in the back row. Interesting tactics. Your team followed unconventional attack patterns. Explain your reasoning, Cadet. Wu looked up from her notebook for the first time. The enemy positions created overlapping fields of fire. Standard approaches would result in immediate casualties. I calculated alternative vectors that exploited blind spots in their sensor coverage. "And yet you still lost," interjected. 18 minutes is still failure human. "Correct," Wu said simply, returning to her notebook. His expression was unreadable. Cadet Park's team lasted longest, and achieved the highest enemy kill ratio before elimination. 4 enemy units destroyed for every friendly loss. The next best ratio was 1-to-1. That caught everyone's attention. Cadets exchanged glances. Kill ratios were not usually emphasized in academy training. Galactic warfare focused on objectives, territory control, and minimizing casualties on both sides. Wars were fought for political purposes, not extermination. How did the human achieve that? Someone whispered. Wu did not answer. She was writing again. The lecture continued but kept glancing back at the human. Something about her bothered him. She was too quiet, too calm, too focused on that damned notebook. After class, he approached her desk. What are you always writing, human? Love letters, poetry. Surely not battle plans given your team's defeat. Wu closed the notebook and stood. She was shorter than most cadets, barely 5.5 feet tall, but something in her posture made his antennae twitch with discomfort. Calculations, she said simply, then walked past him toward the exit. Caught up with Wu in the corridor. The Delphian was one of the few cadets who tried to be friendly. Her species valued cooperation and community, and she seemed genuinely curious about the quiet human. That was impressive in the simulation yesterday, said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her water-world language. How did you know where the enemy blind spots were? Math, Wu replied. Sensor arrays have predictable coverage patterns. I calculated the gaps. Can you teach me? Wu paused, considering. Maybe, but you would not like my methods. Before I could ask what that meant, an announcement echoed through the station corridors. All cadets were to report to the main assembly hall immediately. This was unusual. Mandatory assemblies were rare. The hall filled quickly. Thousands of cadets from hundreds of species packed the tiered seating. Instructors lined the walls, their expressions serious. At the podium, Admiral, the Academy's commandant, waited for silence. Cadets, the Admiral began, her crystalline voice cutting through the murmurs. In 2 weeks you will face your final examination, the war game. Excited whispers rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew about the war game. It was legendary. It was also legendarily impossible. You will be divided into teams and tasked with defending a colony world against overwhelming enemy forces. The simulation has run for 20 years. No cadet team has ever achieved victory. The purpose is not to win, but to demonstrate your tactical skills, leadership abilities, and grace under impossible pressure. Wu's pen moved across her notebook. She was already writing. You have 2 weeks to prepare, the Admiral continued. Study the archives, train with your teams. This examination will determine your final rankings and your assignments upon graduation. Dismissed. The hall erupted in conversation as cadets stood and began filing out. Teams immediately started forming, friends clustering together to plan their strategies. Wu remained seated, writing. Gathered his group nearby, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. We will use the formation, modified for urban defense. Overwhelming firepower concentrated at key. The enemy will break against our positions like waves on stone. His friends chirped and clicked their agreement. Several other teams nodded, clearly planning similar approaches. Galactic military doctrine had been refined over thousands of years. There were proven methods, tested strategies, accepted wisdom. Wu continued writing. Approached her again. Wu, do you want to team up? I know your assigned squad is not very cohesive. Perhaps we could join forces. I appreciate the offer, Wu said without looking up, but I already have my team. We will manage. Can I see what you are writing? Maybe I can help with calculations. Wu's pen stopped. She looked at it for a long moment, then slowly turned the notebook so her friend could see the current page. The Delphian's skin rippled through several shades of blue as her eyes scanned the dense text and numbers. It was not class notes. It was not standard tactical analysis. The page was covered in mathematical equations, probability matrices, and what appeared to be casualty projections. At the top of the page, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Maximum enemy casualties per munition expended, asteroid field analysis." Below that were calculations for optimal firing solutions, not for hitting targets, but for killing them most efficiently. There were notes on different species' physiological vulnerabilities. There were trajectory diagrams designed to maximize damage rather than achieve objectives. A's voice came out as a whisper. Wu, what is this? Preparation, the human replied, taking the notebook back and closing it gently. Everyone else is planning to fight. I am planning to win. But these calculations, they are all about killing, not about defending the colony. Wu stood and gathered her belongings. When all the enemies are dead, the colony is defended automatically. It is simple logic. She walked away, leaving us standing in the empty hall, feeling a chill run through her aquatic biology despite the station's comfortable temperature. For the first time, the Delphian understood why so many species found humans unsettling. They did not think about war the same way everyone else did. They thought about survival, and survival meant something very different when you came from a world where everything wanted to kill you. The Academy library was vast, containing military records from 300 species spanning 5,000 years of galactic history. Most cadets used it to study famous victories, brilliant strategies, and honored commanders. Wu used it differently. She sat at a private terminal in the deep archives section, surrounded by holographic displays showing battle after battle. But she was not watching the victories. She was analyzing the defeats. More specifically, she was analyzing the deaths. Her notebook lay open beside her, filling with data. For each battle, she recorded casualty figures, weapon types used, terrain features, and environmental conditions. She built mathematical models comparing different approaches. She calculated efficiency ratios measuring lives taken versus resources expended. "You have been here for 6 hours," a voice said behind her. Wu did not turn. 7 hours and 43 minutes. A moved closer, her aquatic suit making soft bubbling sounds. "Have you eaten, slept?" "I will eat when I finish this section. I will sleep when I have adequate data." The Delphian studied the displays. They showed a brutal ground battle from 2 centuries ago, where a force had held a position against overwhelming numbers. The battle was considered a heroic last stand. Hundreds of thousands had died on both sides before the defenders were finally overrun. "Why are you studying this battle?" I asked. "They lost." "They killed 47 enemies for every defender lost before ammunition ran out," Wu replied, her fingers dancing across the keyboard to pull up weapon specifications. "The ratio is exceptional. I want to understand how they achieved it." "But they still died, all of them. How is that a victory?" Wu finally turned to look at her friend. "They held that position for 6 days. That gave their civilians time to evacuate. 3 million people survived because 8,000 soldiers killed nearly 400,000 enemies. That is victory." A's skin shifted to a troubled purple. "You are calculating how to kill more efficiently." "Yes. That is not how we are taught to think about warfare." "I know." Wu turned back to her screens. "Galactic doctrine emphasizes achieving objectives while minimizing casualties. Very civilized, very honorable, also ineffective against an enemy that does not share those values." She pulled up another battle, this one more recent. A border skirmish where both sides had carefully avoided excessive force, eventually negotiating a ceasefire after limited engagement. "This battle," Wu said, pointing at the casualty figures, "lasted 3 weeks and resulted in 400 deaths total. Both sides claimed victory. Both sides achieved some objectives. Both sides maintained honor." She switched to a different display. "This battle was fought by humans before we joined the galactic community. It lasted 6 hours, 100,000 casualties. One side achieved complete victory. The other side ceased to exist as a military force." I recoiled. "That is horrible." "That is decisive. War should end quickly with clear winners. Humans learned that lesson over thousands of years of killing each other. We got very good at it." Over the next week, Wu rarely left the library. She attended mandatory classes and training, but every spare moment was spent in the archives. Other cadets noticed her obsessive behavior and whispered among themselves. The strange human was getting stranger. His team trained aggressively in the combat simulators, running drill after drill on defensive positions and coordinated fire patterns. They were confident, loud, and certain of their approach. Several other top teams adopted similar strategies. The tried and tested methods would surely earn them respectable scores, even if victory was impossible. Wu's assigned team was less enthusiastic. They gathered reluctantly in a small conference room at her request, clearly uncomfortable with their human squad leader. There were 5 of them besides Wu. Was a younger and less experienced than most of his warrior species. Her plant-based biology making her slow but incredibly resilient. Was another human, though he had grown up on a colony world and found Wu's intensity off-putting. Was a fast and agile but fragile. Was a crystalline shard, brilliant with technology but completely non-violent by nature. "Thank you for coming," Wu said, standing before a holographic display. "I know most of you requested different team assignments. I know my reputation makes you uncomfortable. But we have 1 week until the war game, and I intend to win." Laughed, "Win? No one wins. The simulation is designed to be unbeatable. We just need to last long enough to show competence." "Unacceptable," Wu replied flatly. "I do not train to fail gracefully. I train to win." She activated the display, showing the war game scenario. A colony world with a capital city, surrounding industrial zones and varied terrain. The enemy force would attack from multiple directions with overwhelming numbers, superior firepower, and adaptive tactics. "Every team for 20 years has tried to defend the capital," Wu said. "Standard doctrine, logical objective. All have failed because the enemy force is too large and too well equipped." "So what do you suggest?" asked, her voice like rustling leaves. "We abandon the civilians." "No. We kill the enemy before they reach the civilians." Wu pulled up a topographical map. The terrain forces the enemy to approach through 3 main routes. All other approaches are too difficult for their heavy armor to navigate. Look here. She highlighted a narrow mountain pass. This is their primary route. Their largest formations will use this path. She zoomed in, showing the pass in detail. Steep walls on both sides, limited exit points, perfect geometry. "We let them enter. Then we collapse the pass behind and ahead of their main force, trapping them. Then we kill everyone inside." The room went very quiet. "That is a massacre," whispered. "That is tactics," Wu corrected. "We have limited ammunition and personnel. The enemy has virtually unlimited reserves. We cannot win by trading kills evenly. We must achieve a massive casualty ratio in the opening engagement to reduce their numerical advantage. She displayed her calculations. Explosive yields, collapse patterns, optimal firing positions, estimated casualties. The numbers were precise and horrifying. If we execute this correctly, we eliminate approximately 60% of their force in the first 30 minutes. The survivors will be disorganized and demoralized. We can then engage the remaining forces on favorable terms. The young studied the plan carefully. His species understood warfare better than most. This could work, but it requires perfect timing and coordination. One mistake and we waste our resources. I have calculated for variables and error margins, Wu said. Review the math. Tell me where I am wrong. For 2 hours, the team pored over her calculations. The explosive calculations, checked the terrain analysis, examined the enemy movement predictions, questioned every assumption. They found no errors. You have been planning this for months, have you not? Asked quietly. Since I arrived at the academy, Wu confirmed. I knew the war game was coming. I have studied every battle in galactic history looking for principles that win wars. I found them. And what principles are those? Asked. Wu's expression was calm but intense. First, surprise is better than honor. Second, terrain is a weapon. Third, the enemy cannot fight if they are dead. Fourth, fear is a force multiplier. Fifth, victory goes to whoever is willing to pay the price. She looked at each team member in turn. Galactic species fight for objectives. Humans fight to survive. When you fight to survive, you fight to kill. When you fight to kill efficiently, you win. Shook her head. This is not how civilized beings wage war. You are correct. This is how humans wage war. My species spent thousands of years in constant conflict on a planet where almost everything was trying to kill us. We learned to be very good at killing back. We learned that hesitation means death. We learned that mercy to enemies often means cruelty to friends. She closed her notebook. I understand if you want to request reassignment. This approach will be judged harshly by some instructors. It will be seen as brutal, excessive, and uncivilized. No one moved. Finally spoke. My grandfather fought in the uprising. He told me that war is not a game, no matter how much the politicians want to pretend it is. He said the purpose of military force is to break the enemy's will and capability to resist. Your plan does both. Sleeves rustled thoughtfully. My people are pacifists by nature. But we joined the alliance because we recognized that sometimes violence prevents greater violence. If we can end the simulation quickly with one brutal strike, is that not better than prolonged suffering? One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Very well, Wu said. We have 1 week. This is how we prepare." She laid out the training schedule. It was brutal and comprehensive. Every team member needed to know every position. They drilled on timing, communication, and backup plans. Wu was merciless in her standards, accepting nothing less than perfect execution. By the end of the week, they were exhausted but ready. News of Wu's intense training spread through the cadet network. Other teams joked about the crazy human working her squad to death for a simulation, openly mocked them in the cafeteria. "I hear the human team has been living in the simulators," he chittered loudly. "All that effort for inevitable failure. How very human. Lots of aggression, no wisdom." Wu, sitting nearby with her notebook, did not look up. She was reviewing final calculations. Adjoined her table, setting down her tray of nutrient solution. "Are you ready?" "Yes." "Can you tell me your plan?" "No, you will see during the simulation." "I am worried about you, Wu. This obsession with killing efficiency, it is not healthy." Wu finally looked up, her dark eyes meeting A's concerned gaze. "You come from a water world where the biggest predator is the size of my hand. Your species evolved in abundant peace. Mine evolved on a planet where megafauna hunted us, where diseases killed our children, where other humans were often the greatest threat. We survived by learning to kill everything that threatened us before it could kill us." She tapped her notebook. "These calculations seem cold to you. To me, they are survival instincts written in mathematics. When the real war comes, and it always comes, you will want humans on your side. Because we do not fight for glory or honor. We fight to win, and we are very good at it." The next morning, all cadets reported to the simulation centers. The war game was beginning. The simulation pods lined the walls of the massive training center like silver coffins. Each team of 6 cadets would enter their shared virtual environment, experiencing the war game as if it were completely real. Pain receptors were dialed down to safe levels, but fear, exhaustion, and stress would feel genuine. In the observation deck above, instructors and off-duty cadets gathered to watch. Massive holographic displays showed each team's perspective, their positions on tactical maps, and most importantly, the casualty counters. After 20 years and thousands of cadet teams, everyone knew how this would end. The only question was who would last longest and die with the most dignity. Admiral A's voice resonated through the simulation network. "Cadets, you are defending Colony World 7. Population 3 million. The enemy force approaching your position consists of mechanized armor, aerospace fighters, and infantry numbering approximately 50,000 combat units. Your objective is to prevent the fall of the capital city for as long as possible. The simulation begins in 60 seconds." Wu lay in her pod, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Around her, the virtual world materialized. She stood on a hillside overlooking the capital city, a sprawling metropolis of silver towers and green parks. Her team appeared beside her, weapons materializing in their hands. "Final equipment check," she said quietly. "Demolition charges. All accounted for. 600 kilograms of high explosive equivalent. Reconnaissance drones. Deployed and feeding data. Enemy force detected at 60 kilometers and closing. Electronic warfare suite. Online and ready. I can disrupt their communications on your command." Prepared for mobile operations. Both confirmed readiness. Wu pulled out her notebook. Even in the simulation it existed, a virtual copy of her real calculations. Enemy vanguard will reach the primary pass in 14 minutes. We move in 5. Confirm. Confirmed. Her team responded in unison. In the observation deck, Instructor watched Wu's team with particular interest. They were not moving toward the capital. They were moving away from it, heading into the mountain ranges to the north. "What is the human doing?" another instructor asked. "The enemy will reach the city unopposed." Patience rumbled, "Let us see." Team, in contrast, was setting up textbook defensive positions around the capital's northern approach. They placed barriers, established firing lanes, and coordinated their fields of fire with practiced precision. It was exactly what the training manuals recommended. "Look at the difference." Image appeared on the common channel, visible to all observing cadets. "My team defends the objective while the humans run away. Typical." In her pod, Wu heard the comment but did not respond. She was counting seconds in her head, watching enemy position updates from drones. "Enemy vanguard entering the pass," reported. "Light vehicles and reconnaissance units. Main armor column 60 seconds behind." "Hold," Wu commanded. Her team was positioned on the high ridges overlooking the narrow mountain pass. Below them, enemy vehicles began threading through the rocky corridor. The AI controlling them was sophisticated, using proper spacing and overwatch positions. But it was following logical patterns, patterns Wu had studied for months. "Main column entering the pass now," updated. "Heavy armor, command vehicles, ammunition carriers, exactly as predicted." Wu watched through her scope as hundreds of enemy vehicles poured into the pass. The AI was confident, pressing its advantage in numbers and firepower. The pass was the fastest route to the capital. Taking it meant victory. "Rear guard entering the pass," confirmed. "The entire vanguard is committed." Wu's voice was calm. "Jam their communications, ground all their drones. Execute demolitions in 3, 2, 1 now." The mountains exploded. had spent the entire week before the simulation calculating precise placement for their limited explosives. The charges were not meant to kill directly. They were meant to reshape the battlefield. Massive sections of the pass walls collapsed inward, triggered in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The rear of the enemy column was cut off first, trapping them behind tons of rock. Then the front exits were sealed, preventing escape forward. The enemy force, stretched along 3 kilometers of narrow pass, was suddenly contained in a kill zone with no way out. Enemy communications are chaos, reported with satisfaction. They cannot coordinate. Enemy attempting to scale the walls, added. Infantry units abandoning vehicles. Suppressing fire on infantry. Target ammunition carriers. You are with me on command vehicles. Wu's rifle came up, her scope finding the distinctive markings of an enemy command vehicle. She fired. The vehicle exploded, the simulation rendering the destruction in terrible detail. Her second shot killed another command unit. Her third, a fourth. Around her, her team executed their assignments with mechanical precision. Heavy weapons found the ammunition carriers, and each kill created a cascading explosion that destroyed surrounding vehicles, and fired into the infantry units trying desperately to climb the unstable rubble, cutting them down before they could reach cover. The enemy was not fighting, they were dying. In the observation deck, silence had fallen. Cadets watched the casualty counters with disbelief. The numbers climbed impossibly fast. 100 enemies killed, 500, 1,000, 2,000. She trapped them, someone whispered. She turned the entire pass into an execution chamber. Stared at the displays, his mandibles frozen in shock. This was not warfare as he understood it. This was slaughter. Enemy force attempting to return the way they came, reported. But the rear passage is completely blocked. They are contained. Wu reloaded calmly. Continue firing. Prioritize vehicles carrying heavy weapons. Do not allow them to target our positions. For 30 minutes, Wu's team maintained their fire discipline. They did not shoot wildly. They did not waste ammunition. Each shot was calculated, each target selected for maximum impact. The enemy AI tried desperately to adapt, to find cover, to coordinate a response. But without communications, trapped in a narrow space with unstable footing and constant fire from elevated positions, they had no effective options. The simulation rendered every death. Enemy units tried to flee and were cut down. They tried to hide behind destroyed vehicles and were flanked. They tried to suppress Wu's team with return fire, but the high ground and prepared positions made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Finally, the firing stopped. Not because Wu ordered it, but because there were no more targets. Enemy vanguard eliminated, reported, her voice shaky. Estimated casualties 31,400. Friendly casualties 0. In the observation deck, the silence broke. Some cadets gasped. Others simply stared. The casualty ratio on the main display seemed impossible. 31,400 to 0. Instructor's 4 eyes were wide. He pulled up Wu's submitted battle plan from her pre-simulation briefing. It was all there. Every calculation, every prediction, every phase of the ambush. She had known exactly how many enemies would enter the pass. She had known exactly where to place explosives for maximum effect. She had even predicted the casualty figures within 3% accuracy. This is not normal tactical thinking, a Delphian instructor said quietly. This is something else entirely. This is human tactical thinking, corrected. We have not seen it before because humans have only recently joined our warfare institutions. But this is how their species fights. Maximum lethality, minimum risk, complete commitment to victory through enemy destruction. On the tactical display, Wu's team was moving again. The simulation was not over. The enemy still had reserve forces, including a main base that would continue spawning reinforcements. Most teams would rest after such a victory, would consolidate their position and prepare defenses. Wu was advancing toward the enemy base. His team, meanwhile, had engaged the enemy forces approaching from the east. They fought well, using proper tactics and maintaining good fire discipline. They traded kills efficiently and held their ground against superior numbers. It was a textbook defense. They were slowly losing. Fall back to secondary positions, commanded. His team retreated in good order, still firing, still coordinated. They were performing exactly as academy training demanded. They would fail with honor and dignity. Other teams were experiencing similar fates. They fought well. They died well. The simulation was progressing exactly as it had for 20 years. Except for Team 23. Wu's team moved through the rough terrain like ghosts, using drones to avoid enemy patrols. They were not heading for any objective marked on the tactical maps. They were heading for the source. Enemy base detected, reported. Heavy fortifications, automated defense systems, and the spawn point for all reinforcements. It is designed to be impregnable. Nothing is impregnable, Wu replied. It simply requires proper application of force. She studied the base through her scope. It was massive, a fortress of weapons and armor. Galactic warfare doctrine said attacking such positions was suicide. You were supposed to bypass them, avoid direct assault, wait for support. Wu had different ideas. Can you access their defensive network? The crystalline shard structure pulsed with light as he worked. Possibly. Their security is sophisticated but follows standard protocols. Give me time. You have 6 minutes while we get into position. Her team moved to predetermined coordinates, locations Wu had selected weeks ago when she first studied the war game scenario. They were not direct assault positions. They were infiltration points, weaknesses in the base's sensor coverage that the AI defenders would not expect anyone to exploit. Because no one had ever been crazy enough to try. I am in their network, announced. Limited access, but I can create disruptions. On my mark, shut down their southern sensor grid for 30 seconds. That is all we need. Wu said quietly, if we die in there, we fail the simulation. We will not die. We will kill them all instead. Prepare for entry. In the observation deck, instructors leaned forward. Cadets held their breath. Admiral herself had arrived to watch, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic displays. The human is attempting to assault the base directly, she observed. Fascinating and foolish. Do not underestimate her, warned. She has not made a mistake yet. Wu checked her ammunition count one final time. Execute. Everyone else move. The sensor grid went dark. Wu's team flowed through the gap like water, fast and silent. They penetrated the outer defenses, bypassed automated weapons, and disappeared into the base's interior structure before the sensors came back online. By the time the alarm started ringing, they were already inside, and Wu was smiling. The real killing was about to begin. Inside the enemy base, chaos erupted within seconds. Red lights flashed as alarms screamed warnings through the corridors. The AI defenders tried to understand how intruders had penetrated their outer security. By the time they identified the breach, Wu's team had already split into 3 groups and disappeared into the facility's ventilation and maintenance systems. They are inside the base, an instructor whispered in the observation deck. How is that possible? Pulled up Wu's approach route on a secondary display. She exploited a 30-second window in the sensor coverage, moved through terrain the AI calculated was too difficult to traverse, and entered through maintenance accesses that are technically large enough for organic beings but not considered viable entry points by the defensive programming. That is insane, another instructor said. The risk calculation alone should have prevented that approach. Human risk calculation is different from ours, replied. We calculate acceptable risk based on survival probability. Humans calculate it based on necessity for victory. If the only path to winning requires a dangerous approach, they take it. On the displays, Wu moved through the base's corridors with, while and took a separate route, and accessed the computer core. Each group had specific objectives, all coordinated to create maximum devastation. Wu's target was the ammunition storage facilities. She had studied the base layout for weeks, had memorized every corridor and junction. The AI defenders sent combat units to intercept, but she had predicted their response patterns. "Contact ahead," warned. 4 enemy units, heavy armor. "Corridor junction in 12 meters. Flash charges on my mark. 3, 2, 1. They threw the small explosives around the corner. The brilliant flash of light and thunderous sound overwhelmed the enemy sensors for crucial seconds. Wu and moved through the confusion, firing with brutal efficiency. 4 shots, 4 kills, keep moving. "A status," Wu asked through the comm. "Reaching the power distribution hub now. Charges set. Ready to execute on your command. Hold for my signal. We are at the computer core. Is working on the spawn control systems. Wu, there are so many defenses here. Are you certain about this plan?" "Yes, trust the calculations." In the observation deck, more instructors and cadets had gathered. Word was spreading through the academy that something unprecedented was happening in the war game simulation. The displays showed multiple teams still fighting valiantly, still following proper doctrine, still slowly losing. And then there was Team 23, deep inside the enemy's most secure facility, somehow still alive and advancing. "What is the human trying to accomplish?" asked, his earlier arrogance gone. His own team was down to 3 members, fighting a desperate last stand near the capital. Even if she damages the base, the simulation will compensate. She cannot win by sabotage alone. "She is not trying to sabotage," said slowly, studying Wu's movements and comparing them to her submitted battle plan. "She is trying to exterminate." Admiral leaned forward. "Explain." "Look at her targets. Not the command systems, not the power core, not the communication arrays. She is targeting the spawn mechanism, the ammunition reserves, and the containment facilities. She wants to trap the remaining enemy forces inside their own base and then destroy everything." A Delphian instructor's skin turned pale blue. "That is not warfare. That is annihilation. For humans, there is no difference." Wu reached the ammunition storage, a massive facility filled with ordnance for the entire enemy force. Guards protected it, automated and AI-controlled. She studied their patrol patterns for exactly 15 seconds, then moved. Her approach was not cautious. It was calculated. She knew exactly where she could move without being seen, exactly when to fire, exactly how many shots she needed. The guards fell in a sequence so precise it looked choreographed. Followed her, placing demolition charges on the primary support structures. "Charges set," he confirmed. "Wu, when these detonate, the explosion will be massive. We need to be far from here." "I know. We have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Move." They ran back through the corridors, retracing their path. Behind them, more guards appeared, alerted to the intrusion. Wu did not stop to fight. She dropped proximity mines as she ran, small devices that detonated when the pursuers triggered them. Each explosion bought them precious seconds. "Report," she commanded while running. "I have partial control of the spawn systems. I cannot shut them down completely, but I can lock the deployment gates. The enemy reinforcements will spawn but cannot leave the containment area." "Perfect. Execute immediately." "But Wu, there are already 2,000 enemy units in containment waiting for deployment. If I lock the gates, they will be trapped in a relatively small space." "I know, do it anyway." In the containment area deep in the base, 2,000 enemy combat units suddenly found themselves unable to deploy. The gates that should have opened to release them to the battlefield remained sealed. The AI controlling them tried various override protocols but had been thorough. They were locked in. "It is done," reported. "But the enemy is attempting to break through the gates physically. They will eventually succeed." "They will not have time. Get out of there. Head for the extraction point." "What about you, Ant?" "We have one more objective. Status. Power distribution hub charges are armed, awaiting your command." Wu checked her internal chronometer. Everything was proceeding exactly on schedule. "All teams, extraction in 90 seconds. Detonate on my mark in 10, 9, 8. The observation deck was silent except for the countdown. Everyone understood what was about to happen, but the scale of it was difficult to comprehend. 3, 2, 1, execute. The power distribution hub exploded first. Massive surges of energy cascaded through the base's systems, overloading and destroying delicate equipment. Lights failed. Emergency systems struggled to activate. The entire base went dark except for emergency lighting. "Ammunition storage detonating in 30 seconds, Wu announced calmly. "All teams clear the blast radius." Her team ran through the darkened corridors, following routes they had memorized. Behind them, the base was in complete chaos. The AI defenders were blind, their sensors offline, their coordination destroyed. 20 seconds. Wu and burst through an exterior access door, running into the open ground beyond the base perimeter. 10 seconds. And emerged from a different exit, sprinting toward cover. 5 seconds. And cleared the outer walls, diving behind a rock formation. 0. The ammunition storage detonated. The explosion was not just large, it was catastrophic. Thousands of tons of military ordnance ignited simultaneously, creating a shockwave that rippled through the entire base. Secondary explosions followed as fuel depots, weapon systems, and power cells added to the devastation. The containment area. where 2,000 enemy units were trapped, was directly adjacent to the ammunition storage. They did not survive. In the observation deck, the casualty counter spun wildly. The numbers climbed so fast they blurred. 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. The simulation struggled to calculate the total destruction. "Impossible," someone whispered. The base's spawn mechanism, damaged by the power surge and destroyed by the explosion, went offline permanently. No more enemy reinforcements would appear. The enemy forces already in the field, scattered across the map and fighting other cadet teams, suddenly lost all support and resupply capability. They were on their own. "Enemy base destroyed," reported, her voice shaking. Casualty count still rising as the simulation processes secondary effects. "Woo, we did it. We actually did it." "Not yet. Enemy field forces remain combat effective. We eliminate them next." Team, down to 2 survivors, watched in shock as the enemy units attacking their position suddenly, their tactical coordination collapsing. Without central command or resupply, the AI controlling them defaulted to survival mode. "What happened?" asked over the open channel. "Team 23 destroyed the enemy base," an instructor replied. "All of it." On the tactical map, Wu's team markers began moving again. They were not heading back to defend the capital. They were hunting the scattered enemy survivors. Admiral A studied the displays with an expression no one could read. "Instructor, pull up Cadet Park's submitted battle plan." Though projecting the document for all to see, it was extensive, detailed, and terrifying in its thoroughness. Every phase of the assault had been planned. Every contingency had been calculated. Every casualty figure had been predicted with eerie accuracy. At the bottom of the plan in neat handwriting was a final note. Expected enemy casualties, 47,005-2000. Expected friendly casualties, 24. Expected outcome, total victory through enemy annihilation. Acceptable alternative, total victory through enemy combat ineffectiveness. A Delphian professor spoke quietly. She planned to kill 50,000 enemies from the start. This was not about defense. This was about extermination. "This is how humans think about warfare," said. "They do not fight to achieve objectives. They fight to eliminate the enemy's ability to threaten them. When given a target, they do not ask how to outmaneuver it. They ask how to destroy it completely." Another instructor pulled up historical human conflicts from before Earth joined the galactic community. Battle after battle showed the same pattern. Overwhelming force applied at decisive points. Casualty ratios that would horrify civilized species. Victory through complete destruction of enemy forces. "Look at this one," the instructor said, highlighting a conflict from human history. They called it the Highway of Death. Enemy forces retreating, no longer a threat. A civilized species would let them go. Humans destroyed the entire column from the air. Thousands killed in hours. Or this one, naval battle. Enemy fleet crippled and retreating. Humans pursued for 3 days, sinking every ship. No mercy, no quarter. This is their nature, Admiral said softly. We invited them to join our alliance because we thought they would adapt to our ways. We did not consider that they might be showing us a different path entirely. On the simulation displays, Wu's team systematically eliminated the remaining enemy forces. They did not accept surrenders because the simulation AI was not programmed to surrender. They simply killed every enemy unit they encountered, efficient and relentless. The casualty counter continued to climb. 40,000, 45,000, 50,000. Other cadet teams, those who had survived long enough to witness the conclusion, watched in a mixture of awe and horror. This was not the war game they knew. This was something else entirely. Finally, after 6 hours of simulated combat, the simulation ended, not with defeat and honorable failure, with a message that had never appeared before. Scenario complete. All enemy forces eliminated. Total victory achieved. The observation deck erupted in shocked exclamations. Cadets from 100 species stared at the final statistics. Enemy casualties, 51,247. Friendly casualties, 3. Team 23 had 1. The simulation pods opened with synchronized hisses. Cadets emerged slowly, some stumbling, others sitting in silence as they processed what they had experienced. The deaths had not been real, but the emotions were. Fear, exhaustion, despair. These lingered even after the neural interfaces disconnected. Wu stepped out of her pod calmly, as if she had simply attended a lecture rather than orchestrated the deaths of 50,000 simulated enemies. Her team emerged around her, looking shaken but alive. Sat heavily on a bench, his hands trembling slightly. Sleeves had lost some of their vibrant color. Even whose species glorified warfare looked disturbed. "We won," whispered. "We actually won." "Yes," Wu confirmed simply, pulling out her notebook and making a final notation. The observation deck had emptied as instructors and cadets flooded down to the simulation floor. Hundreds of beings crowded around, staring at Team 23 with expressions ranging from admiration to revulsion. Pushed through the crowd, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "That was not warfare," he said loudly. "That was butchery. You killed enemies who were trapped. You destroyed forces that were no longer a threat. You showed no honor, no mercy, no civilized restraint." Wu met his gaze without emotion. I showed effectiveness. The objective was to defend the colony. I defended it by eliminating the attacking force, all of them, by slaughtering them like animals, by killing them efficiently. Would you prefer I had let them live to attack again, to threaten the colony later, to kill civilians? A Delphian cadet stepped forward, her skin rippling with distress. There are rules of warfare, conventions, standards of civilized combat. You violated all of them. I violated galactic conventions, Wu corrected. I followed human military doctrine. We do not fight for points or honor. We fight to win. We fight to survive. Elle approached her friend, her aquatic suit bubbling softly. Wu, I saw your tactics. You trapped them in the pass and killed them when they could not escape. You locked enemy forces in their containment area and then destroyed the entire facility with them inside. These are not the actions of a defender. These are the actions of an exterminator. Correct. Wu opened her notebook and showed pages of calculations. Every decision was calculated for maximum enemy casualties with minimum friendly risk. That is what these numbers mean. That is what I have been preparing for months. She looked around at the assembled cadets and instructors. You all train to lose gracefully, to demonstrate competence in defeat, to uphold honor and conventions even in failure. I train to win. There is a difference. At what cost? Another cadet asked. You killed 50,000 enemies, 50,000. Even in simulation, that number is obscene. That number is victory, Wu replied. Every one of those enemies was trying to kill my team and conquer the colony. Every one eliminated is one less threat. The mathematics are simple. Instructor pushed through the crowd, his 4 arms carrying Wu's submitted battle plan. Cadet Park, this document predicts almost exactly what happened. You planned this entire operation weeks in advance. Yes, sir. I analyzed the war game scenario, studied historical battles with similar parameters, calculated optimal approaches, and developed a strategy designed for total victory through enemy annihilation. Why annihilation? Why not simply disable their offensive capability? Wu's expression remained calm, but something flickered in her eyes. Because disabled enemies can recover, retreating enemies can regroup, defeated enemies can return, dead enemies cannot. When you face an existential threat, the only acceptable outcome is the complete elimination of that threat. Admiral descended from the observation deck, her crystalline form reflecting the lights of the simulation center. The crowd parted before her. She stopped in front of Wu, studying the young human with intense focus. Cadet Park, you have achieved something unprecedented in the 20-year history of this simulation. You have also demonstrated an approach to warfare that troubles many of your fellow cadets and instructors. I understand, Admiral. Do you? Do you understand why your methods disturb us? Wu considered the question carefully. Yes. Galactic civilization has spent developing conventions and standards for warfare. Wars are fought for political objectives, territorial disputes, economic advantage. They are meant to be won through superior strategy and minimal necessary force. Death is an unfortunate side effect, not the primary goal. She paused, then continued. But humanity comes from a different context. We evolved on a death world where survival was never guaranteed. We fought animals that could tear us apart. We fought diseases that killed our children. We fought each other for resources when resources were scarce. We learned that hesitation means death. We learned that mercy to enemies often means cruelty to our own people. We learned that the only reliable way to protect what we love is to completely destroy what threatens it. The Admiral's expression was unreadable, and you believe this approach is superior. I believe it is effective. Different species, different contexts, different solutions. Galactic warfare is optimized for advanced civilizations with shared values and common understanding. Human warfare is optimized for survival against any threat, regardless of whether that threat shares our values or conventions. Spoke up. The concern, Cadet Park, is that your approach could lead to unnecessary escalation. If everyone fought to annihilate their enemies, wars would become far more brutal and destructive. Perhaps, Wu acknowledged. But I would argue that wars already are brutal and destructive. The difference is that humans acknowledge this reality and optimize for it, while galactic doctrine pretends warfare can be civilized. My question is this. When an enemy appears who does not respect galactic conventions, who does not honor rules of engagement, who fights for total victory rather than limited objectives, which approach will prove more effective? The one that assumes civilized restraint, or the one that prepares for ruthless efficiency? Silence followed her words. Finally, a voice from the back of the crowd spoke up. It was Wu's fellow human and teammate. I want to say something. I grew up on a colony world. I was raised with galactic values and galactic education. I thought the way most of you think. I was uncomfortable with Wu's methods. I am still uncomfortable with them. He stepped forward, standing beside his team leader. But I watched her plan work perfectly. I watched her save all of our lives while eliminating an overwhelming enemy force. And I realized something. We humans, we try so hard to fit into galactic civilization. We adopt your conventions, follow your rules, prove we can be civilized. But maybe we bring something else to the alliance. Something you need, even if it makes you uncomfortable. The young spoke next. My species has been warriors for thousands of years. We understand violence better than most races in the Alliance. I have studied warfare my entire life." He looked at Wu with something like reverence. "What I witnessed today was not brutality. It was art. Terrible, horrifying art, but art nonetheless. Every move calculated, every resource optimized, every outcome predicted. This is what peak tactical efficiency looks like. It is uncomfortable because we are not used to seeing warfare performed at this level." A's voice was quiet but carried through the silence. "I am still troubled by the methods, the trapped enemies in the pass, the locked containment areas. It feels wrong." Wu turned to her friend. "I understand. Your species evolved without significant predation. You developed cooperation and community as survival strategies. These methods seem cruel to you because cruelty was never necessary for your ancestors' survival." She opened her notebook to a specific page showing the calculations. "But look at the alternative outcomes. If I had fought conventionally, defended the capital directly, my team would have been eliminated within 2 hours. The colony would have fallen within 4 hours. Projected civilian casualties, between 500,000 and 1 million. She turned the page. "My approach resulted in 0 civilian casualties. My team suffered 3 injuries, all minor. The enemy force was eliminated completely. Which outcome is more cruel? The one that follows conventions and accepts mass civilian death, or the one that violates conventions but saves millions?" A stared at the numbers, her skin shifting through shades of blue and purple. "When you put it that way, the choice seems obvious, but it still feels wrong." "Feelings and effectiveness are not always aligned," Wu said gently. "This is something humans learned over many painful centuries." Admiral A raised one crystalline hand, commanding attention. "This discussion is valuable, but we must address the practical implications. Cadet Park, your performance today has forced us to reconsider our entire approach to military training. You have demonstrated that human tactical thinking operates on fundamentally different principles than what we teach." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I am promoting you to the top of your class. Your team will receive full honors. Your tactics will be studied and analyzed. However, I am also requiring that you present a series of lectures on human military philosophy. Our cadets need to understand this perspective, even if it disturbs them." "I understand, Admiral. I will prepare the lectures." "One more thing." The Admiral's expression grew grave. "You should know that an hour ago we received urgent communications from our border stations. An unknown hostile force has emerged from deep space. They are not responding to diplomatic overtures. They are not following engagement protocols. They are simply attacking, destroying everything in their path." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled cadets. The attack patterns suggest a species we have never encountered before, a species that does not share our values or conventions, a species that appears to be fighting for conquest and extermination rather than limited political objectives. The Admiral looked directly at Wu. "We are about to face an enemy that fights the way you were trained to fight, an enemy that will not be deterred by our rules or restrained by our conventions. And I suspect we will need humans, with your uncomfortable methods and your death world instincts, to defend us." Wu closed her notebook slowly. "How long until they reach Alliance core worlds?" 3 months, perhaps less." "Then we have work to do. My calculations were designed for simulation parameters. Real warfare will require adjustments." She looked at her team, then at the other cadets. "Anyone who wants to learn human tactics, meet me in the library tonight. We will begin immediately." Stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "I mocked you. I called you names. I was wrong. Will you teach me?" Wu studied for a moment. "Your species has good instincts for aggressive tactics. Yes, I will teach you. But understand, learning human warfare means accepting that sometimes the only path to protecting what you love is through the complete destruction of what threatens it. Can you accept that?" "If it means saving my people from this new threat, yes." One by one, other cadets stepped forward. Delphians, even other humans. They all wanted to learn. They all understood that comfortable conventions might not be enough anymore. Approached Wu as the crowd began to disperse. "You knew this was coming, did not you? This new threat." "I suspected. The galaxy is vast. The idea that all intelligent species share common values and conventions is statistically improbable. Eventually, we would encounter someone who did not play by our rules. I simply prepared for that eventuality. By becoming what they might be." Wu smiled faintly. "No, by remaining what humans have always been, survivors. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and each other. We will help the Alliance survive this too." She walked toward the exit, her notebook clutched in her hand. Behind her, the simulation floor was filled with quiet conversations as cadets processed what they had witnessed. The war game would never be the same. Military doctrine would never be the same. The Alliance itself would never be the same. Because they had finally seen what happened when you gave a human a problem and asked them to solve it. They did not find elegant solutions. They did not seek minimal impact. They calculated the most efficient path to complete victory and executed it without hesitation. It was not pretty, it was not honorable, it was not civilized. But it worked. And when the real war came, when an enemy appeared who did not care about galactic conventions or rules of engagement, the Alliance would be grateful to have humans on their side. beings who understood that sometimes survival requires the mathematics of